a situation I navigated this week that really, to me, highlighted the importance of these skills and how I was able to use the skills that we've worked through in this course to really, I think, show up in a way that might not have been possible without them. And so I have a friend, close friend, who brought a roommate into his living situation a few months ago. And about a month ago, discovered that this roommate was drinking very heavily. And the person went to rehab after making a big old mess in the apartment and stealing some liquor that was kind of a sacred offering that was being saved, and went to rehab, came back sober, made an attempt to make amends. They had an agreement that if it were to happen again, that he wouldn't be able to live there anymore. And sadly, over the weekend, this person relapsed and again kind of made a big mess. Really, rock bottom is the best way to put it. And so I went over there to support my friend in helping navigate the situation. And my friend was really torn up about what to do, losing sleep, feeling really badly about having to, send this person on their way in the state that they were in. And, how could we best support him and care for him? And I think it was Sunday morning, this guy had gotten into quite a bit of alcohol early in the morning, and by 9 a.m. was, dangerously intoxicated. And so we had to get him to the emergency department. And there was a lot of physical contact involved in encouraging this guy to come along with us, and a lot of patience and really trying to meet the situation with compassion. I noticed that my friend had really lost his patience, and he was kind of approaching this guy with, ultimatums and frustration. And I was able to, help him step back and hold some compassion for this guy, and also to approach him in a like kind of very one step at a time kind of framework. Like he's not going to be able to, process or understand your anger or your impatience or frustration. Is actually not useful in this situation to be coming at this with force. And so, how can we support? How can we care for what's here, which is a dangerously intoxicated person who needs help? And this guy, I was able to get him to agree to come with us, even though he was very disoriented. But he kept trying to pull me down into the bed with him. And he was just very kind of gropey. And there was just all this physical contact. And I realized afterward, in talking to my friend, that without really realizing I was doing it, I was very intentionally using these skills and setting boundaries so that I wasn't going to absorb a lot of that kind of ick and those feelings and those negative emotions of, really being in despair and at rock bottom. And so as I was offering my hand and as he was making all this physical contact with me, I actually was very intentionally taking my attention and putting it down in the bottoms of my feet. I was doing things like really focusing on my posture as I, went to move his body, and as he was hanging all over me, and as there was something wet getting on me, and, just this kind of really awful situation. But I was really doing this intentional practice of keeping my attention grounded in my present moment experience so that I could be available to be of support. And we got to the emergency department, and it took some time for him to get it admitted. And he ended up resting his head on my shoulder and kind of passing out again. And again, it was one of these times when I just kind of made an active choice with my attention. And I shifted it away from this, like, ugh, this burden, this weight on me that I didn't necessarily want. I just shifted it again down into the sensations of gravity in my body and really just kind of rooted and stabilized myself there. And I did what I could to just make contact with my heart and offer care. He wasn't feeling great, And best thing I could do was offer love and guidance and help him get to support. We thought maybe once he was in the emergency room that he would get checked into some kind of facility because he was claiming that he would have seizures when he detoxed. So he needed that kind of care, but he was back later that evening. And so then the next day we had to have this conversation with him. And before we went into the conversation, we took some time to actually just get grounded and use some of those communication skills that we talked about last week to, really approach the situation from kindness and care. And we were able to identify before we sat him down to have the conversation that if we allowed him to stay, we would be enabling his drinking because we didn't have the support to keep him from that or to help him. So, from that place of care, really what's the act of kindness here? We were able to talk to him, and he was surprisingly receptive and understanding of that. And in the end, he slipped away and took off in his vehicle when we stepped out for a short walk, which was unfortunate because we had made an appointment to get him admitted at a rehab center later that afternoon. And we don't know where he is now, but we know that we did the best we could and that we have to kind of release attachment to this situation. We can't just keep letting it take up mental real estate, and that his well-being is not our responsibility. We've done what we can to ensure his safety and that he doesn't harm others. And just being able to kind of navigate that and returning again and again to the body and to these attention stabilizing practices has supported both me and my friend as we've navigated this very, very difficult situation. So I share that story with you just as a kind of evidence that these boundaries that we're working with, these ways that we're cultivating the capacity to be in the driver's seat of our attention, they're very powerful. And uh, the response of this alcoholic person, he was very appreciative of our attempts at care. And, I like to think that when he's on the other side of this, he'll remember, that he wasn't alone, that he wasn't treated with hatred or violence, but that he was held in as much of a way we had capacity to hold him and to nurture him. Because I think being alone and feeling as if you've got no one is one of the most painful experiences in life, and that's really where people who are addicted to these numbing and mind-altering substances really can sink down deeper and deeper into that low place of very low self-worth. So little acts of encouragement can go a long way, and we can keep ourselves resourced enough to be able to offer that by just really radically staying fierce in our commitment to our groundedness and our regulation.